So I know I cover this in almost every lesson, but just to reiterate, I see a lot of painters starting with the sky, and that's a bad idea. You can start with the sky, and have that be the first major section of the painting that you complete, but you still need to actually put a couple dark notes down. Just a couple dark. This will get covered up too, this dark. The top of the tree is kind of right there. Yeah, a bigger tree here. And just that little bit of dark right there will help me start painting the sky. So from this dark, grab a little bit larger brush now. I can start painting that gray, purpled kind of gray part of the sky right there. So I'm going to mix a purple with the ultramarine blue and alizarin and a touch of yellow to gray that purple down. This will probably be way too dark. Oh, not bad. Not bad at all, actually. I'm going to put a little bit more purple and lighten it just a hair. Maybe get a little bit lighter in purple over here. You can kind of see in the photograph it seems to get a little lighter in purple over there, and then it gets a little bluer over here. This is so much fun for me. I love, I paint these hay bale paintings so frequently because I love doing them. I love the juxtaposition of the detail, the hay bale, the structure of it, and the light hitting it, but then the towering clouds above. So it's a composition I will repeat, and as long as it's getting better. It's okay to repeat yourself if you're improving upon a theme. I mean, look at Monet, and a lot of painters will paint the same motif and subject over and over and over in pursuit of making it better. Andrew Wyeth, too, is another one who notoriously would paint, many small versions of a painting before doing the large final version. So the paint is actually going on pretty thin now. Not a lot of big brush strokes. I want to keep the paint thin until I get everything kind of blocked in. Squint my eyes and just kind of so the gray gets a little warmer. See, notice it's purple down here. The shadows and the clouds are purple down here, and then as it rises, there's more reflected light from the sky bouncing into the shadows, so they warm up and they get grayer and warmer. Might be a little bit off, but it's okay. All this can be adjusted. So the main thing you should be looking for, and it took me years of painting before I started doing this, is not paying attention to the actual color so much. You want to get the color close, but it's not the important thing because the color can easily be shifted later. The important thing is making sure that the value is correct. And this is an intermediate lesson, so all of you should know what values are. So I'm not going to explain that again because I tend to explain the same things over and over again in these lessons. And if you're watching this, you should be intermediate. And if you're a beginner, just go back and watch some of the beginner lessons and I explain what values are frequently. I guess that took as much time as I could have just explained it, but I hate feeling like I'm repeating myself. All right, some basics there. Now I can move up and block in the sky, the blue part. Now what I'm doing is I'm gonna pull up a painting I painted before of hay bales, kind of look at the way I did the colors in the sky. I don't want to paint this too, I want to paint it like it's at sunset, so I don't want the sky to be too blue like in the photograph. I think I want the sky to be a little bit more on the like purple end of the spectrum maybe. You know what? I think I'll do a nice purple deep blue for the sky here. Add a little bit of purple to it. Let's see how dark that is. So I'm going to start dark and I can lighten it later if I want. The darker you make the blue part of the sky, the more illuminated the clouds will look. So if you paint the sky too light, like this, then the clouds are not going to pop. They're not going to look lit. So that's one of the keys to these kinds of paintings is contrast. It's making sure that the values don't necessarily match the photo, but match what you're going for. So if your goal of a painting is illumination, creating a luminous light effect, then you need to really adapt and change the photo so that it supports that subject, which is the light. Whatever you can do to increase the contrast. So I'm mixing a little bit of red into this sky to give it a little bit of that sunset purple kind of thing you get going on sometimes. So notice how I took that lighter reddish gray right over that royal blue and just kind of blended the brushstroke right into the blue. And it gives it that hazy kind of atmosphere. And remember, blue skies, especially at sunset, the closer they get to the horizon, it gets grayer and warmer. Careful when I come up to the edges of my underdrawing not to paint over and lose the shape of these clouds. You see, that's the wonderful thing about doing a detailed underpainting like this of the clouds, is that all the hard work is done, the drawing. Now I'm just coloring and working on texture and shifting things. I may shift the shape of the clouds too. And if the sky is too purple, I can add some more aquas and greens into it later too as well. What's the complement of purple? Yellow, right? So that's another thing. The clouds here have quite a bit of yellow and orange in them, so the purple will help balance that, and the blues. Here's another interesting thing about color. So we often learn about complements, you know. We learn that purple, these two together, are the complement of yellow. Green these two together are the complement of red. And complements are they are a primary and a secondary color. So green and purple are both secondary colors, orange as well. So the interesting thing though is that what is the complement of a yellowish orange? Right? A color that is yellow but has a little bit of orange in it. Is it purple or is it blue? Well, it's a bluish purple. So I know this is kind of confusing, but follow me on this. So the way the color wheel works, is you get all these options. So it's not strictly like bright yellow is the complement of bright purple. If it's a orangish yellow, then the complement will actually be a slightly bluish purple. I'm going to move to my smaller filbert, size 8. It says size 8, but it's actually really small. It's more like a size 5 in other brands. I'm going to get a little more bluish gray down here. Oh, too much. There we go. Maybe put a little more red down here. Just a few little broken color brush strokes of red. Clean off the palette. And let's bounce around a little bit. Let's move down into the landscape and the hay bale, get that painted or mostly painted. And then we can kind of bounce back up and paint the clouds. And that way we're working on everything at once so that the colors are in harmony. Let's mix up a green for the tops of these trees here. Cadmium lemon. That's too light, but we can use that for the grass. Let's mix up both yellows, a touch of both blues, and a little red. And then let's mix up a little more of a bluish green over here. Still too light, so let's make a darker green too up here. There we go. It's best to start trees dark and paint the lights into them. Add a little red to this to warm it up. I'm going to soften the edge there and then paint the trees over the top. Needs to go darker. Let's put a little more purple into this. Now this looks a little too dark. That's okay though. I can paint the lighter greens right into it. So the light is coming. Oh, you know what? I didn't think about that. The light on these clouds is coming this way. Well, I guess it's kind of coming at an angle straight on. So that means the light hitting this needs to be consistent, or the foreground has to be in shadow. I'm glad I caught that. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reverse the hay bale. If I reverse the shape this way, then the light will hit that nice, beautiful part right there, creating that vibrant orange. So take my rag and I can just still erase this because it's wet. And then I can draw in with a pencil. Let's put the hay bale right here. Coming down at an angle. Shadow going that way. It's good for you to see this actually. This happens frequently in paintings where you catch something and you have to fix it. So I'm going to grab, all this paint is still wet, so I'm going to grab my finger and place the tip of a paper towel over it and dip it in odorless mineral spirits so it's wet. And now I can, this is called picking out. I can actually just go into the wet paint and erase it and brighten up the light. Paint a little bit of the grass around. So the grass in the background back here, this is more of a hillside coming up, and then there's going to be a little thing of grass going this way. So the grass in the distance is going to be slightly more bluish to make it recede. Because remember, blue in general recedes. Our eye reads blue as distant. So if you want to push something into the distance, that's a trick you can do. You can just add some blue to it, and the eye will read it as being a little bit further away. So there's going to be some bushes or something kind of down here, kind of. And then this tree. Take my trusty palette knife here and just blend out some of that. Great thing about a painting this size is it's a lot looser. At least it appears looser when you get up close or you take a photo of it, because a big, large painting, from a distance, it just naturally appears tighter. So in smaller paintings, it's easier to get that looser look. And every now and then when you use the palette knife to blend like this, just you get kind of, as Bob Ross would say, happy little accidents, things you didn't plan for that you can use. Interesting edges. I like the way that that tree kind of went off right there. It looks natural now. And just from the palette knife dragging the paint created that effect. All right, so now I want to bounce up and start painting these clouds in. The way I like to layer these clouds is I like to start with the orange and the red and the pink and add the highlights in over the top. So I will actually start pretty darker and build the light up on them. And I'm also going to paint these clouds a little bit more orange and red than they appear in the photograph. So I want them to have a little bit more of a punched up kind of color and saturation to them. So everything will look too dark first. I'm actually going to pick a little bit more pink or purple rather down here. Add a little bit of blue in. Now I'm going to drag my finger across and soften this edge. I'm pushing in and I'm going up and down. Turner, lots of painters, the way you just can't replicate their effects without getting your hands into it, you know. I mean, Turner spit on the paintings and did all sorts of things to get whatever sort of effect he needed. So you can't be timid with the paint. So if you are, make sure you're buying non-toxic oil paints, pigments that don't have any history of cancer, and then you shouldn't be afraid to touch the paint. And if you are at that point, you're just being paranoid. And I can't help you. All right, so kind of a dirty orange here. So I'm moving from pink to orange and then eventually to a yellow underpainting for way up here. And the clouds appear white up there, but really it's actually like a dirty gray orange, and there's a couple highlights of a bright, bright yellow. And another thing to remember with oil paint, or with any painting, you're not going to be able to paint light. We create the illusion of it. We can't actually paint the light though. So you have to settle, sort of, with tricks and things to get that look. You can't just expect to be able to paint it, to paint a yellow as bright as what shows up in real life. When we try to punch up a yellow brighter than white, it just turns white. So we have to darken everything to get it to work, darker than real life, to get the color saturation up. There we go. This should be a little better. So I'm just going to solidly underpaint most of this with the side of the brush, lightly scraping. I'm not putting the paint on thick. I keep using my thumb to wipe it back, so I make sure I'm not putting it on too thick. Just scrub it in. Here it starts getting brighter and a little more yellow. Maybe a little more red in that. See how I've simplified everything? The detail is a process on these clouds specifically. I'm executing a simple plan. Let me clean off the palette here. So I'm not working in pools as much as I normally do in this painting. There's so many color shifts that it's just easier to kind of mix the color into separate spots. Now it's time to start painting wet in wet and adding the shadows in these clouds. So I'm going to mix up a purple. Let's try this first. So the paint is wet. So the shadow part of this cloud is just slightly darker than the sky. You don't want to paint it the same color and value as the sky, otherwise it's just going to look like it's blending in, and it'll make the cloud look weird and thin. Let's blend that out there. Now, if these edges are too hard, so I'm going to grab a darker reddish kind of gray that's going to serve it to soften the edge of these clouds here. Need a little more red in it. All right. I hope you were able to follow along with that, because it's important what I just did there. It's not an easy thing to vocally explain. It's just you have to have a dark, and then you have the light. But if there's no soft transition, it just becomes posterized, which is, that poster effect where everything is sharp and doesn't look realistic. So the edge, that little bit of a reddish purplish gray that I put between the dark purple and the lighter color here, that's what creates the illusion of detail and realism, is that soft edge and how I treated it. Now in here, there's a shadow right here, and it's bluer because it's reflecting the blue of the sky, because the way it's facing is the cloud is like that spatially. So anything that's this way doesn't reflect as much of the blues, but anything moving this way is reflecting more of the blue above it. So this is all stuff I know just from experience of painting outside and really observing clouds. But also you can clearly see it in photos too. It gets a little lighter too. And redder down here. So I'm jumping all over with the color here. All right, right here it gets lighter. And you look at the shadows in the clouds here. They're not red, they're not yellow, they're not blue. It's really difficult to distinguish what color is there. And that tells me that it's a gray. So something like this. It's probably too dark. There we go. Here as well, there's another one. And this can all be adjusted here further when I start layering the lighter parts back into these clouds. Here, things get lighter. I'm going to blend these edges here a little bit more. It's kind of a funky looking cloud, but you know, that's the way clouds really are. You don't want to, it's really easy to overanalyze clouds and think they look weird. We don't see the weirdness in clouds when we are outside, but we do when we're trying to paint them for some reason. But if you really look at most clouds, they are not picture perfect. They're not perfectly balanced. They're kind of weird and funky looking. I need to paint some of this more saturated. I'm losing color and it's just... So I'm going to blend a lot of things together here and then start reworking some color back into it. You can use your fingertip or the palette knife. I'm using the fingertip. All right. Maybe get a little more aqua kind of blue in here. Okay, can leave that for now. Another thing I can do is I can use a little actual blending brush, which I have not been doing much lately. If you've been watching my lessons, I used to blend everything a lot in the early lessons, and I'm not really using a brush. I've been using a palette knife to blend. I like the way it makes the paintings look. Some people like that blended look more, like everything's smooth with the blending brush. I like everything a little rougher, more painterly, but still realistic. But today, let's use the brush. I want this painting to look really as good as possible.